Welcome everyone to the 2024 Lambtown Festival Sheep to Shawl competition. This is the judging for the virtual division, and this is the kickoff event for Lambtown Festival 2024. And we're thrilled to have you all joining us today, whether you're watching live or later on watching the video. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with a sheep to shawl competition, it is a timed competition in which teams start with an unprocessed fleece and finish with a wearable shawl. For our Fairgrounds Division team, that means 7 people plus 1 educational liaison. They have specific jobs in terms of who is allowed to spin and weave and ply. And they have a total of 4 hours. So they'll start around 10 a.m., finish around 2 p.m., and they have 4 total hours. For our virtual division, which is something that we started during the pandemic back in 2020. We wanted to still be able to hold this competition in spite of everything that was going on. The rules are slightly tweaked for the virtual division in that people don't have to all be in the same 15 by 20 foot of square feet at the same time for the same 4 hours. So the rules allow for a little bit more flexibility there, but the overall timing is still the same. So if you multiply out your 7 people times your 4 hours, they get the same amount of hours with a virtual team as you do for our Fairgrounds Division team. So the competitions are very fair that way. The other way that the 2 divisions are similar is that with the Fairgrounds Division, they have an educational component. Most of the time they have sort of a storyboard, some of their samples, a little bit of fiber that people can get their hands on and touch and feel and kind of see the process a little bit of what the teams are going to go through. For our virtual teams, obviously they can't do that, but what they can do is they create a video that tells a little bit of the story of their process from sheep to shawl, lets us get to know the team members a little bit and everything that goes into creating their shawl. Today we will get to see those videos as well, which is their educational component. And as this is a virtual competition, today we have 3 teams competing from all over the country. We have Oregon, Washington, and New York State as the home bases for these 3 teams. So welcome everybody watching, not only in California, in and around Northern California and the Dixon area, but all over the state and all over the country. And what we're going to do today, after my little intro here, I'm going to read a little bit about our judge, Shelia, who is live with us here. We are going to view the shawls via some photos that we have taken. Then we will watch the videos, which is that educational component that the teams have created. Then we will hear Sheila's comments about each of the shawls. So we're going to see the photos, watch the video, and then hear Sheila's comments, and we'll do that for each of the shawls. And then last but not least, Shelia will give us her placements, who's the winner, who came in as the runner-up, and so forth. And after that, if we have time, we'll leave a little bit of space for some comments, questions, anything that you all might have. So without further ado, let me introduce Shelia and we'll get this started. Shelia January has judged knitting, spinning, weaving, fleece quality, dyeing, sewing, quilting, and embroidery at wool festivals and fiber arts conferences, as well as state and county fairs. She also wrote about preparing spinning for judging in the premiere issue of Ply magazine, one of my favorites. Before retiring from competition to judge, Shelia won Best in Class, Best in Show, and First Awards at fiber festivals, including some of our sister events, Maryland Sheep and Wool and New York Sheep and Wool. So Shelia, welcome. You can unmute and we can get started here. If there's anything you'd like to...
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning and welcome. Good morning. If there's anything you'd like to say before we just jump right in, let us know. Otherwise, we can get the slides up here and get started.
No, just that I'm very happy to be here, and this is a great experience.
All right. Okay, so here are our 3 entries. And you can see we've got some lovely shawls here. Right. So here's the entry from, I love this name, A Sheep at the Wheel. Excellent team name here. And I believe we have one more slide and we'll pop into their video. That was a pretty fun video. I especially liked at the end there where the person at the post office was excitedly waving as well for the photo. That was pretty good. So thank you to a sheep at the wheel for this video. And I believe as soon as the video stops, we'll get to see a little bit of, there we go. We get to see. So Sheila, if you'd like to unmute, we could hear your thoughts about this shawl.
Okay. I do think that the colors are beautiful. I really like the color and I like the choice for the weft color of the Romney, the silvery kind of beige Romney. Very, very attractive with all these pinks and oranges, kind of salmon colored. I do think that the pattern is not showing up as well. I hope it shows up better when it's fulled, because right now we're kind of, the colors are so vibrant, we're losing the actual patterning of the weaving. And I'm sure it will show up more as it fulls. But this is a pretty thick shawl. It's a shawl that has a varying thickness and density throughout because of the difference in the warp. And I'll talk about that a little more when I get to sort of the weaving section. But the warp used here was, as it showed on the video, a choice of 5 different blends of wool and silk, mostly, that were chosen from a batch of spinning. My assumption would be that they were chosen with different spinners having spun them. And because of that, the difference in the fiber blends, as well as the breed of sheep and the spinner, there's going to be some variation that comes out, and that does get addressed in the weaving section. The weft is a Romney. That's a good choice too. I will say that the hand of this shawl is really, really soft. It's a beautiful hand for the types of fibers that are in it. And I think the Romney must have been a really special one. So that would be my comment. There is a slight variation on length. I remeasured all the shawls, well, the shawls that I got, 2 of the 3. And there's about a 1/2 inch variation in the length of the shawl, but it's still well over minimums. There is about a 3/4 inch variation at different positions on the length in the width. And that, again, will get addressed a little bit more in the weaving. Do you want video comments now, Roy, or later on?
Yeah, I think it makes the most sense to address the whole everything from that team at once. So
Okay.
however you want to do it, whether it's, overall and then the weaving in the video, or you want to talk about it now, whatever we can. I'm open to anything.
Okay, I was kind of following on the scoring sheet that gets used for the in-person one, so I'll do the video next,
Sure.
because I think that kind of gets inserted in there. The video was very nice. It showed a lot of professional quality. I did find the music a bit distracting because it had a very short repeat and reminded me a little bit of the alarm on my iPhone, which gets louder and louder with each repeat. This luckily didn't do that, but I think that something with a little longer music, and the fact that there was no narration to go with it made the music seem louder than it probably actually is. Um, there's the limited information comes across because there's no narration, I think. We got no real information on the warp other than seeing the various balls of spun yarn lined up with each other. But we did get good information on the draft for the weaving and on the calculation of amounts of warp needed, and that was great. I did think the video also passed by pretty quickly. I live way out in the country, so my internet is not perfect, but it's generally pretty good. And most of the time, it didn't actually resolve into a good resolution before it moved on to something else. So I think a little bit slower on the video would be good, and perhaps some comments along the way about some of the various activities being taken up. I did have to back up several times to sort of get the information that I was looking for. So all in all, a good video, an entertaining video. I did love the clerk as well. And I really liked the last shot of the happiness of the shawl. So that was great. So that would be my comments on the video. On the spinning, I'll do that first and then go into the weaving. There was an inconsistency in the spinning, both in the warp and in the weft. In the weft, we kind of expect to see a little bit more inconsistency because people are rushing. But in the warp, I think most of the time on a sheep to shawl, since it's done ahead of time and the loom is warped ahead of time, there is a little bit less inconsistency on that. And this kind of went through to some really underspun thick parts and some very overspun thin parts. So that kind of comes out in the weaving later on. I do think the plier, Sandy, I think her name was, did a great job of trying to match the thinner singles with some of the thicker ones, and you can tell in the warp that she did that pretty as consistent as she could, and in the weft. So good job, Sandy. Because of the over twisting of the singles, which resulted in over twisting at times in the plying, there is worming coming out in several places on it. And I think probably we all understand what worming is, but it's basically when a little tightly twisted part is going to poke up out of the weaving and be very visible. And that I saw it in at least 3 places. There might have been a few, there might have been more, but again, you know, a little less twist when we've got a thin single will create less chance of worming. And that is hard to do when you're under a time pressure, but kind of important to do. And actually on the warp shouldn't have been a time pressure really. So I think that, you know, having one person do the warp or having people do the warp with sample cards, I didn't see any sample cards or that had been used to get people to spin to the same consistency on the warp. And sample cards are a really big help, both for singles and for the plying. So I think that might be a suggestion I would make for the future, is more sample cards and less individuals doing the warping, spinning, or the spinning for the warp. That would be my comments on the spinning. Sarah, the spinning twist does vary on both the warp and the weft, and there are a couple of places where the singles came apart in the plying, and those ends are poking themselves up. I think if they're visible here or not, poking themselves up through the fabric. So that also could be changing of the warp threads at the selvages, which again, they need to be buried a little bit more on the selvages. Although now I'm going into weaving. So I think I will go into weaving because that's the next thing. Continuing with the selvages. The selvages are relatively loose on both sides. One side is considerably more loose than the other, and is one where I can go through and move the threads really, the weft threads really easily on it. So I think that a little bit more attention to the offside for the weaver would be a good thing. I know we all have one side or another that's easier to keep a nice, straight, beautiful selvage, but I think that it's a question of just more practice on that offside. I also think that the warp thread on that one side is a little bit loose because it's kind of looping out of the weft at times. Again, that might be something that fulling will take care of, but we all know that we hope that fulling takes care of everything, and it usually doesn't take care of everything. At least not on my weaving. So that's kind of it. There is one pick error close to the one end of it, which is kind of sad because it's other than that, there's no other pick errors at all in the piece. There are slightly wavy fell lines and edges, and that is creating that 3/4 of an inch difference that I measured when I went through various parts of the shawl and measured on the width. The one thing that I really was a little concerned about and jumped right out at me really quickly. And even jumped out at my husband when he saw it laid out, and he's not a fiber person at all, is that there are loose picks consistently throughout the entire length, every 9 to 10 inches. And that creates a sort of bubbling effect there. And I don't think that will fall out. I could be wrong, but I don't think it will. And there are several things that could contribute to that. There might be others, but the ones I'm familiar with is that possibly there's too much distance too much distance of weaving before advancing the warp, which can cause the sheds to be either very small or very large and can create that looseness in the picks. And the looseness generally is lasting about 3/4 to an inch every time it happens. The other possibility is that maybe there was too much slack in the warp when it was advanced. I think the whole problem is happening when the warp is advanced, but there are a couple of different things. And if there's too much slack, that slack doesn't always get taken up as well. And even though it's sounds like a warp tension issue, it becomes a weft tension issue or a tension issue on the picks as well. So that's something that I think should be probably addressed in the future. And it might also, again, be partly caused by the fact that there were 5 different warp spinnings that don't always come out the same when they're being tensioned. So that is one thing that was very noticeable to me. Hope that most of it comes out in the fulling, but I don't think that it all will. On the finishing side, the fringe looks really nice. It's nice and tightly twisted. I will say it's trimmed very short and very close to the knots. And I will pull up a little piece of it there.
Yeah, can I,
Um,
how about I,
Very
how about I
short,
promote
very
you to
close to the knots.
I'm gonna spotlight you here. If we can, if Kira could, there we
Oh,
go.
okay.
All right, now you're full size there.
Okay.
There we go, Sheila.
Okay, so now you can see that the trimming on the fringe is a little uneven and it's very close to some of the knots, and on some of them it's already starting to loosen the knots a little bit. I would say there's a good example of the knots starting to loosen up. So you might want to add a little bit more length to the knotting before you start to trim from there. And that will create what will have that problem not happen. And it also, again, is contributed to by the fact that there is a difference in the diameter of some of the warp threads. The hem stitching is very nice. No pull in on the edges, very tidy and with the ends buried well. So congratulations on that. All in all, a really attractive shawl. This is a shawl that would be one that would be really comfortable to wear because the hand is so nice. And that soft hand also helps with the drape. Hopefully it won't thicken up too much when it is fulled because it is somewhat thick as a start, but it would be a nice warm shawl. Those are my comments.
Now that we've got you on full screen, Sheila, can you show us some of the things you were talking about earlier where I believe it was you said the singles were broken or the worming you were talking about, if there's anything that you can find offhand there that maybe
Okay,
we
let me
could
find
show.
some worming.
It's always harder to find it when you're actually looking for it than when you're not, I know, but it'd be nice to be able to show the people at home kind of what we're
I
talking.
know.
And just so everybody knows, while Sheila's looking for these here, these shawls will be on display in the Fiber Art events display area, our Skeins and Textiles display in Madden Hall on festival weekend, and that's October 5th and 6th, 2024 coming up here. So let's see if Sheila's got something for us.
I don't have the worming, but what I have here is a pretty good example of that looseness of the picks that happens every night. You can see it right there happening. And it's pretty consistent, which is why I think it's an issue with the warp advancement. Did that show up, Roy, pretty well?
Yeah, we're getting a
It's loose enough that
we're getting a low
now
bandwidth message from you, so we can
oh, sorry.
that's okay. we can move along here. Like I said, everybody will just
Okay.
have to show up in person and see him. So,
Okay.
okay, so I believe we have the next part of the slideshow queued up. Go. All right, so this shawl is from Spin City, and they are out of New York State. And we should have a video for them here.
The Spin City's Shawl team's virtual entry to the Lambtown Sheep or Fleece to Shawl competition this year was created by 6 members of our larger group. Our inspiration for this year's shawl was wine from California vineyards. Our color palette was drawn from the colors of grapes in our favorite wines. We used several shades of purple, raspberry, and maroon to celebrate the 2024 vintage. The spinners on the team used sample yarn cards to help them maintain consistency and uniformity while spinning the warp from lustrous and strong blue-faced Leicester cross fleece, sourced from John and Kate Bostic at Rockland's farm. The spun singles were sent to Lynn, who plied them and then wound the warp. Lynn dyed the hand-spun warp in her kitchen. She mixed several shades to create a fluid mottled effect on different warp chains. After drying, each section was daisy-chained to hand off to the weaver. Jenny dressed the loom with all of the chains. She slayed them through the reed here, then threaded the heddles to create the weaving pattern, and wound the warp onto the back beam. The weft we use is a natural-colored dark brown Corriedale from Nancy Burns at Marble Peaks Ranch. It was a fine fleece, soft and suitable for a shawl. Amy prepared the fiber with a fine-tooth drum carder. The drum carder opened up the locks so the team could easily spin them. Amy teased the washed locks, fed them through the drum carder several times, then pulled the fleece off the carding cloth. The resulting bats were fluffy and ready to be spun. Dawn was one of the spinners who gathered at Jenny's house to spin and weave together. She drafted the carded bats to spin singles on her wheel. Christina was happy that we found a light-colored lap cloth to spin the dark fleece. Lynn and Jasmine also spun singles, twisting the fiber in a clockwise direction. Jasmine plied the weft by twisting 2 strands of singles together in the opposite direction from which they were originally spun, counterclockwise. This creates a strong and balanced yarn that is easy for the weaver to use. Jenny, the weaver, loaded the weft yarn onto a weaving bobbin and inserted it into a shuttle, which carries the weft back and forth through the warp threads as she throws it from one hand to the other, creating the fabric of the shawl. Christina continued to spin singles while Jenny started to weave. Here is a close-up shot of the shawl on the loom. You can see the twill patterns we chose. It is a structure that enhances the drape of the wool. The threading incorporated different patterns to create design interest. The last step before the shawl came off the loom is hem stitching. This ensures the shawl will not unravel and creates a tidy appearance. This is the finished shawl draped on a dress form. And voila, a finished shawl. The team attended an Alice in Wonderland themed tea at the Botanical Gardens in New York City. We brought the shawl along to take pictures and show it off. Here's Christina showing off the drape. The stripes in the shawl echo the planting lines in the vineyard. Just like fine wine brings people together, so does Sheep to Shawl, and we are so grateful to have this opportunity to spend time together.
Okay, that was also a fun video. I believe now we have some photos of that shawl. There we are. Lovely. And Sheila, let's hear your thoughts.
Okay. I have to say, I live in wine country myself, so I certainly appreciate the theme. The colors are beautiful. I think that the stripes were very well done on the outside stripes and the selvages and the next couple. In the inside, there's a very nice pattern that goes into diamonds on the inside. And I will see if I can find a place where it shows up a little bit more than in the photos there. There it is. If I'm on, am I on?
Yep, you're spotlighted there.
Okay. You can see the diamond pattern coming out more in the center. That doesn't show up as well when there are dark colors because the weft is so dark itself. And then when you get a dark warp, that doesn't show up quite as well. But overall, the theme is well represented by the colors, and the colors are really nice. The warp was BFL. The weft is a dark Corriedale, which contributes to the overall coloration of the shawl. It's very pretty. It is, however, not as soft as I would have expected with those two wools. So it's an interesting thing. Sometimes when we get a dark colored sheep, that affects the fineness of the fleece, and the dark Corriedale might have contributed to the fact that its hand is not quite as soft. This might not be a shawl you wanted right up into your neck and face, but one you'd wear around your shoulders. The length of it, it's interesting because the length varied about 1.5 inches from side to side, but the width was spot on at 22 inches the whole time. So I think that, again, that sounds like a warp tensioning or possibly the way the selvages were handled. Not obvious when you look at it. The sides look very straight, but there is a difference in length. The video, if I do the video first and then I'll move on to spinning and weaving, the
Sure.
video had very soothing music, which was nice. I couldn't hear the repeats nearly as much as in the faster, louder music in the last one. I especially liked the background, which, again, being a person who lives in wine country, I could see the vineyards behind the spinners and behind them. And given that I know that some of these people were not in the same location as others, the background provided a really nice overall blending of the fact that people were doing this in separate places. So that was nice. I liked the narration. There wasn't a lot of specific information in the draft or some of the other planning stages, but the narration helped to get over that, and explained really well the choices that were made and why those choices were made. And I think that's always important when we're doing some planning and doing things. I think that there was a great tool in the weaving that we saw on the video, which was the measuring tape, a measuring device down the center to make sure that they got the right length for the competition. So great video. On the spinning, and while the video was running, since I've watched it several times already, I went through and I actually have examples this time of some of the things that I will talk about. The plies look to me in several places to have been knotted, and that works maybe sometimes, but in this case they came unknotted and the ends are moving to the top. That one I couldn't see, but I found it two times in the shawl, so hopefully that gets fixed so that they don't unravel more during the fulling and in the wearing. The singles were a little inconsistent on the warping, and they were also a little inconsistent on the weft, but the inconsistency mostly lent itself to over twist rather than under twist. And I do have examples of worming here. And I will hold it up really close. And I think I'm going to try and put it on the edge so you can kind of see that those little ends are sticking up there. That's because there's an over twist. And because of that, and here's one that's coming along, and it's just starting to come up with its friend over here. So
can you hold it a little higher there, Sheila?
okay, over twisting and worming coming out. So that's going to happen when there's over twisting in both the singles and the plying. So I think that unfortunately it happens here and there. One of the things that happened though that is not as easily, oh no, and I lost it when I was looking at the worming. Maybe I'll find it again here. Ah, here it is that one of the places where it came unknotted and where it was over twisted on top of that is that we have a little coil coming through. Can you see it, Roy?
Little higher up for us. There we go. Okay.
And so it's really one of the singles is seriously twisted around the other one. I found myself wondering if that even made it through the reed in the heddle. But it could have happened during the weaving too, and when everything was under tension. That is a warp thread. So unfortunately, that one really needs to get fixed before things go any further with it, and really becomes a lot more obvious in the fulling. It's not going to go away at all. So the worming happened at least half dozen, maybe even 8 times throughout the length of the shawl. Again, just a case of over twisting and having the singles in the over twisted warp meet up with each other when they're plied. There's one thing here that I kind of found interesting. There's a very, very white warp thread, and I'm going to hold it up high this time. If you can see, a very white plied in with a very colored one. I don't even think it was a case of under dyeing. It looks to me and feels as if it was a different fiber that crept in with it. But it is pretty obvious, and if I were warping, I would have pulled that out and not used it in my warp, because it's distracting from the overall pattern and coloration. So that again was something, or it could have been pulled out in the plying. That would have helped too. So either in the plying or in the warping, that would have been happening. Oh, yes. So in the weaving, on one of the ends of the shawl, there's kind of a distractingly big amount of pull in on the hem stitching. So that's something to watch in the future to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's about a quarter of an inch on each side. It only happens in one end. And so can be fixed, I think, before the shawl is totally finished. There are some beading inconsistencies here and there. Nothing major, nothing that was so loose that I could do much. One of the things I do when I judge a woven or a woven item is, in addition to using my eyes, I tend to use my hands, and I will drag my hands through the weaving, feeling for inconsistencies or loose spots where even if my finger doesn't go through it, I can feel the difference. I think all of us have a great sense of touch, and if we used our sense of touch in addition to our sense of sight, it helps to evaluate things. One selvage is really good. One has some loose loops, not all the way through, but is sort of in the middle, loose enough that I can put my little finger almost through them. Again, so something to watch. All of us are one-handed, and well, most of us are one-handed. So we tend to do better on one side than on the other side, and to just keep an eye on that for the future. On the finishing, the fringe was really well twisted, nicely tightly twisted. And since the warp threads are relatively thin on this, consistently thin, you've got a consistently small fringe that looks very much. The only thing is that those over twisted things have come out in the ends of the fringe, and that's not going to go away. So there's kinking of some of the fringe because of the over twisting. So that kind of kinking shows me that it was a serious over twisting, that hopefully the spinner and plier of the warp threads will catch that the next time and not just put it through. It doesn't hurt the shawl, but it doesn't look really attractive when you've got it literally kinked up into little curls on some of the ends. The hem stitching is well done. The ends are well buried. Other than and one end is not pulled in. So I think that, again, it might be just the angle of having to do it on the loom is better for the person who's doing the hem stitching on one end than the other. And those are my comments.
Awesome. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is our third team here. This one gets an honorable mention as they did not get their shawl in on time. There is a time component in terms of how long they have to make it, but there's also a time component in terms of production and when we have to have it in hand in order to actually be able to take the photos and get it to Sheila so she can judge it in time and whatnot. So this one comes from a team that's won first place several times for us over the last 3 or 4, or I guess this is our 5th year now, doing it virtually. So this is from Lamb Chops Spin Along. I have a little blurb to tell you about this one here. It's from a blue-faced Leicester fleece from a sheep called Penelope. The warp was painted with sodium alginate thickened dyes. They did a collaboration or merging of the Great Wave and Starry Night. So you can kind of see that going along in there. It's a kind of fun thing going on. It says the weave structure is a finished bird's eye and it was woven at 10 DPI. The yarn is marled and was dyed in separate pots with sapphire and turquoise dyes. The shawl measures 22.5 inches wide by 85 inches long with 8 inches of fringe. And again, while we don't have this one in hand for Sheila to judge, it will be, I believe it'll be on display in the Skeins and Textiles display for Lambtown Festival, October 5th and 6th in Madden Hall. So you all can see it there. So any thoughts on this one here, Sheila, while we're looking at it?
It's really too bad that it didn't get in time to be judged and for me to see it. I mean, the pattern is really striking. I think it's a really great example of what you can do with a painted warp, because it was so easy to see the mountain and the wave and the starry night and the moon. I'm guessing it's a moon because it's a crescent. And the bird's eye pattern is really beautiful and doesn't distract from the overall scene. I think it's a really lovely shawl, and I can certainly see why this team has won several times in the past, because of the amount of detail that they put into their work.
All right, very nice. Okay, so I believe that our next slide, now that we've seen all 3 of them, I believe we are going into placements at this point. So let's take a look here. All right, and congratulations to our virtual division winner, Spin City. Sheila, what separated this one from the A Sheep at the Wheel, and what really set this one over the top?
I think that both of these shawls, if I had just been looking at them, I mean, the colors chosen and the patterning chosen is really wonderful on both. The thing that set this one at the top is that they did not make any major errors. Some of the errors in the over twisting of the warp and knotting of the warp that was coming apart are fixable or are not as noticeable. On a sheep at the wheel, the missed pick, which is something that always comes to one's eye, as well as those loose picks throughout the body of the length of the shawl, are something that I think is tougher to fix and did help to downgrade them just a little bit in my mental scoring. So that's the reason for the placements.
Excellent. And there we go. Okay, so we'll start to wrap up here a little bit. This is the conclusion of our virtual judging. It'll be really interesting to see, Sheila, as you were going along there and talking about some of the weaving issues. I was kind of thinking in my mind about, were the weavers maybe getting a little bit tired as they were weaving, or was this the sort of thing because they're allowed in the virtual competition to do it across sessions? Is that a thing where, maybe they wove for an hour and then took a break and then wove for another hour? And was that maybe sort of an issue for them? So it'd be kind of interesting to know whether or not this was woven continuously across 3 to 4 hours like it is for our Fairgrounds Division teams, where, maybe as the shawl goes along, you might start to see some errors happen because they're tired, or those inconsistencies with the selvage. So this will be very interesting to see how these shawls compare to those from our Fairgrounds Division. And is there anything else you'd like to say, Sheila, before we kind of close it out here?
I think that is going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing the teams that are working under the pressure of having to do it all continuously. And then that'll, of course, the scoring and the placements there will get compared to these placements for the overall. So it'll be a fun time.
All right. Excellent. So thank you, Sheila, for being our judge this year for both divisions. And I know the teams appreciate your feedback as well as on the videos. And we all look forward to hearing your judging the Fairgrounds Division, which will happen at Lambtown Festival at the Dixon May Fairgrounds in Dixon, California on Sunday, October 6th. So thank you again, Sheila. I also want to thank the whole Lambtown Festival Fiber Events team, which is Marjorie, Rachel, Kira, and Rigel. Thank you all for putting in all the time and making this happen. And last, I want to thank everybody for watching, and hope you all can join us in person. Lambtown Festival, like I said, is coming up October 5th and 6th at the Dixon May Fairgrounds. You can order your tickets now and avoid the line at lambtown.org. And we hope to see you all there shortly. And if you give us a little bit, this video will be up on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it, watch the recap, and start looking forward to festival weekend. And I think that'll do it for us here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye now.